Welcome to today's Social System Mapping OnRamp session for May 8th, 2023. Your host today, as usual, are me, Christine Capra, co-founder of sumApp and Greater Than the Sum, and Kara Martner, who does our production of much of the stuff that you see, and tech support. So what this is, for those of you who are new or haven't been around for a while, and a reminder would be helpful, is basically it's a vision about a possibility, the possibility being that this kind of mapping methodology that we've developed and we've developed the tool set and we're still developing the methodology for, which we call social system mapping. The possibility and the vision is that this is, that social system mapping can help transformation networks and change groups, any kind of collective change initiatives become self-organizing more quickly and become better transformation agents and be more wise in their change actions so that they're more effective. It's a learning opportunity about how to make social system maps, as well as the methodology that is being developed around getting the most value out of the social system maps. And it's also a learning, it's a multilateral learning opportunity for all of us to learn from each other about what you know, both about just organizing as well as and network weaving, as well as mapping, from the technical stuff to the methodological stuff. It's also a community of practice. There are a number of us who spend a significant amount of time both mapping and figuring out how to make maps, the methodology around maps, more useful and accessible to all kinds of groups. And in this community of practice, being a mapper, in terms of technically being a mapper, is one piece of the puzzle. And social system mapping is the core, but it's not just for technical geeky mapper types. It's also for all of us who want to think about the methodology and getting the most value out of maps as well, and how to ourselves become carriers of a culture of transformation so that we can help the communities that we map become more transformational. So that's that. For today, we're going to do chat. We're going to put intros in the chat in a moment. I'm going to walk us through the Transformation Systems Mapping and Analysis Working Group map. This is a group that Tim and I mapped a few years back, and it's public, so we're able to share it with you. Much of our client maps are private, so we can't share them. But we're going to focus on the dual element factor feature that the abbreviation is TSM&A, because that's a long it's a long label. So we're going to look at the dual elements, which means individuals and groups that we did in TSM&A. There'll be time for questions and answers, and then we'll stop the formal session to the degree that it's formal. It's not super formal, but at any rate, we'll stop at the top of the hour for those of you who need to jump off. And then if you want to stick around and just have a more informal, chat, whatever is up for you, kind of conversation, that we'll do for an extra half hour after the session. So I'll stick around, and some other people probably will as well for that, if you're interested. So let's go ahead and just put in the chat name, pronoun, location. And this is just to give everyone an idea of who's present and what kinds of things we're working on. I'm going to stop my share for a moment. Hannah, I thought you were in Minnesota for some reason. Like, I thought you were working at the U of M.
University of New Mexico.
Oh, New Mexico.
Yeah.
I used to live in New Mexico. You'd think I would notice it anyway. But you're in Colorado. Yeah. Which is pretty close to New Mexico, right?
Yeah, it's a drive. Like, I'm in the north, but I'm just doing remote work for them, so it's okay.
Yeah. My geography is a little mushy at this time of day. Okay, and then and Anna's from Brazil. She's in London at the moment, so welcome, Anna. And Andrea from Halifax. So we've got people from all over. We also have the U.S., Richmond, Philadelphia. We have some Californiaites I'm aware of. So welcome, everyone. What's one primary network that you're part of or working with? If you don't have one, that's fine. If you don't even want to do any of this, don't feel pressured. It's all invitation only. Social system mapping teams at the University of New Mexico. Hannah also just, my son went to the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, so I should have my geography clearer in my head because I've driven that route many times. City Transformation Collective, cool. Working with regional table to shift physical activity behaviors and populations, interesting. Staff and governance of the American Friends Service Committee. Lovely. So a range of kinds of focuses and kinds of groups or networks or communities. And then let's go to what brings you here today? What's up for you? What do you want about? It's job hunting at the moment, cool, or fun or scary, all those things maybe. Brian, it's Monday, yep. There are people present, just for those of you who know that just always show up. It's Monday is a good enough reason. It's a great reason. I appreciate that reason. Seth, yes, I appreciate that reason as well. So for those of you who have more specific reasons and who are newer to this context, one of the things that I want to point out is that this session is for you, and the people who show up because it's Monday are partly showing up because it's supportive of the overall community, and partly showing up. I mean, the kinds of topics that come up in in today's sessions really are sessions that they can help answer and help you develop your knowledge. But we're here for the newer people, and so there's no question that's too dumb, and there's no like if it looks like no one's got anything to say, it's probably because half of us are waiting for you and giving you space. And so if you don't want to step into that space, do not feel pressured in any way, but also feel free to say, I got nothing, so that everybody knows that. But really, we want you to be comfortable. So, okay. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, I think. We did the chat intros. Okay, so for just to clarify, because it happens that people sometimes even start working on a social system map and we haven't made it clear enough how a social system map holds together. And that can be a little confusing at first. And so I'm going to just make that clear. I make this clear every time. sumApp is a data gathering tool that we use for social system mapping. sumApp is the tool that my partner and I have developed. We developed it specifically for this exact kind of mapping. So it's not a generic survey tool. It's not a sort of a social network analysis tool. It's been designed to do what we want to do in social system mapping, which is there's just more complexity to it than what you're used to. And it also takes the data and formats it in a way that can be read by a few different graph database visualization tools, but the one we generally use is Kumu. And so so we gather the data in sumApp, both data about people and data about their relationships. The data then gets plugged into Kumu. So sumApp is one tool. Kumu is a separate data visualization tool designed to visualize graph databases, which graphs in the technical sense are dots and lines. So whenever you see this kind of a thing, doesn't matter what's in the dot or the line, if you see this kind of a thing, what we're looking at is a graph. So Kumu does the data visualization. So we'd gather the data in sumApp, put a link into Kumu, plug the data into Kumu to design the views, the filters, the ways we want to interact with the map. The map members have access to Kumu, and they can, so when we're designing it for the use of the members with that in mind. And then once we've got our map designed the way we want it to be, we take what's called the embed link from Kumu and plug it back into sumApp, and then sumApp and turn on the map page in sumApp so that the members of the community who are being mapped have only one interface. They only have to deal with sumApp. They don't have to have a Kumu account. You can still have your Kumu account be private, and they can still access the map without them having to set up accounts, which means you don't have to give approvals, et cetera, for every person in the network. They don't have to try to remember there's 2 platforms, I go from here to here. It's just all in this one platform. So that can, as I said, when I'm showing a map and I'm just showing the outcome, it can be, it's easy to miss that these are 2 platforms, and we build them each separately and then hook them together. Okay, so I'm going to go to today's map. And I think I'm going to go to today's map. So, and what I'm going to do today, welcome Denise. If you want to do a mic check, feel free.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so what I'm sharing today with you today, a map that Tim and I made for a good friend of mine, became a good friend of mine in the process of this project, Glenn Page, who was doing working on building a network of people who are systems thinkers and transformation thinkers and mappers of various kinds. And so this was a map of fairly eggheady, highly educated, mostly consultants or professors of some sort. He and we put a lot of time and energy into it for about a year, and then he ran out of funding, and it didn't, so this map is going to have some unique features that I think are cool and want to share with you. And it hasn't, like, it didn't, the impetus to keep it alive and keep it growing and moving forward wasn't there. So this is the data that's in there is not as robust as we had hoped it would become, and it is not being updated. But what I wanted to share with you about this map had to do with, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I just want to see, do all of you, just by a show of thumbs up, who is aware of the dual element function? Not that I'm not asking you to know a whole lot about it, but who's aware that it exists in sumApp? And I guess I can't see with Andrea and Anna, but you can put up thumbs on your icons if you're able.
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. Anna, are you?
No, I'm not as well. Yeah, I don't remember if you mentioned on last session by name. Okay. It doesn't ring any bells.
Okay, that's good to know. So I will walk you through what that means, and glad to know that. So when we first built sumApp, it was designed for. We designed it assuming it would be used for mapping individuals' relationships. That was the context in which we'd done all our work up to that time. So sumApp is designed to gather data about a person. So is whatever kind of questions about me you want to ask, whatever, and in you and Brian and Mary and Denise and et cetera. So questions about us as individual human beings, and then questions about our relationships from person to person. So my relationship to Denise, my relationship to Jim, my relationship to Tom. But before too long, we got people saying, well, we want to map. We don't want to map people, we want to map organizations. We want to map all the nonprofits that are working on X, for example. And so we had to make some changes to sumApp, and that was fine, and we did that. And then we had people who wanted to make maps of both people and organizations. And what we could do is we could just take two projects. We could set one up as a person project. So the survey is designed for people, and the connection questions are designed around defining interpersonal connections. And then you could have a separate project where the survey is designed for organizations, and the relationships questions are designed around organizational relationships, which are very different than personal relationships. You know, it might be a partnership, there might be a service provider, it might be a parent company, etc. So, but they're going to be defined differently. So that was essentially the initial challenge, was just that you needed different kinds of surveys and questions for the two entities. And we did some of those with some clients with the two projects, but the problem was, well, there were two problems, major problems. One was that you could put all this data into the same map, but you just have people related to people and organizations related to organizations, and you couldn't see how the people were related to the organizations. So you couldn't see, like, for instance, I'm a staff of this organization, or I'm on the board of this organization, or I get services from this organization, or provide services, etc. So that relationship between the individuals and the organizations wasn't there. And if you had somebody who, say Denise might be on a map of organizations and individuals, and Denise would answer, we would want her to answer the person survey as herself, as Denise's values, Denise's, demographics, etc., and Denise's personal relationships to other people. But we might also want Denise to be a representative of her organization, and then to be saying, as a representative, these are the other organizations that we have some kind of relationship with. And so that was also a problem, because we would be sending two sumApp links to one person, and that person would be saying, I did that. What do you, like, quit bugging me, whatever. Or they would just never be able to wrap their head around what is going on here, that they're so different. I don't get this. So it's very confusing. And then there were, the getting the data into Kumu needed to go from one link. So you had to do a bunch of working around to get it to work. There were a couple other smaller challenges, but so we, a few years ago, decided to do this, what we call the dual elements feature. And the dual elements feature is where you can take two separate projects in Kumu, in sumApp, set them each up, one as for individuals, one as for organizations. We have sometimes people who are, like, one guy is currently working on a map where instead of individuals, it's organizations, and instead of organizations, it's coalitions. So what organizations, we're finding out about the organizations, and then we're also getting information about the coalitions and finding out the organizations' relationships to coalitions. So you can do this a number of ways. So what happens is you can set up two separate projects, like you've been able to for a long time, but then you can link the projects. And when you link the projects, what happens is you get a third connection type, which is asking about the personal relationships to the organizations. So then you can ask questions like, are you the founder? Are you on the board? Are you a staff person? Do you get personal services from this organization? Are you a service provider to this organization, et cetera? So you can have those personal connections as a third connection type that people can answer. And the people who, like I used Denise as an example, who in our just as we were designing it, our jargon, we called the org reps. So someone who is both a person, individual, and representing an organization. So they have two roles in this map. Those people will get one sumApp link, not two. And the interface will be integrated. So that's what a dual elements, the dual elements feature, a high level description of it. And because I was going to talk about the TSMNA map today, and the TSMNA map used the dual elements feature, I thought I'll focus on the dual elements feature today. So before I go forward, I just want to check if, especially Hannah and Andrea and Anna, have any clarifying questions that would be helpful to answer before we start looking at stuff. You're good, Hannah? Okay, Anna's good. Okay.
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. And first, I'm going to just back up a second. So this is the back end of sumApp. If anybody, for those of you who have any kind of sumApp account, you'll recognize this. This is Glenn Page. So Glenn Page is the account holder here for whom we made this map. And so there you can see there are two projects. One is the very long name of this network, which is a person type of project. So these are the people, and there are 149 members in that map. And then we used a variation on the organizations theme, which was we didn't map organizations, but we mapped working groups that were subgroups of the network itself. That there actually turned out to be three kinds of groups that we mapped. So when we say organizations, what we really mean is anything that is any kind of identifiable group of people. So a plurality as opposed to an individual person. So if you're mapping any kind of plurality and you feel like that plurality requires its own survey, its own connection questions, and it requires some kind of ability for individuals to identify how they're related to that plurality, this will work that way. So in our instance, in the TSMNA instance, we mapped work streams. So and so that was the organization. The project was defined using this project type here as a plurality. This was a singularness, and this is a pluralness. The nodes would be plurals. And then you can see here that they're linked together. So this is, and what this means is that each of these has a different survey, it has different connection questions, and then there's also a special place where it we define the linkage questions and manage what shows and what doesn't show for that. So that's what the back end looks like. I'm going to take another pause and stop sharing my screen and just ask how many of you, by a show of hands, have made, I think Seth, you might be working with dual elements. How many of you have actually made a map with dual elements? Jim has, Seth has. Okay. So I can't remember why I asked you that, but it's good to know. I think because I was just sitting here thinking, I think Seth has done this. I think Seth has done this. I think, and I just wanted to double check that. So, okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And let me just
Christine,
yeah.
Can you just say singularity and plurality again? I missed what you were referring to there. And
okay, so it's not a singularity in that science-y singularity. No. But when we're setting up our project types, I mean, the biggest distinction that people will say, well, can I use like sometimes people have sort of very fuzzy sense of the distinction, like they might want to map two different networks of people and link them. And that's not what this will really serve very well. And so what I've come to say to people when we're talking about this is, if you want to map persons, individual persons, one human being, if you want to map individual human beings, have nodes that the dot represents a human being, but you also want to have dots that represent a plurality of human beings, a group of human beings. Now, and one of the things that makes this confusing for people is you could just use a list of organizations and cluster on them. And if you clustered on them, it might look very similar on the surface to a linked thing. And so, okay, I'm not going to go there because it's very confusing. But the idea is some people have used this, and this is a workaround, and it's messy, and it's fine if people want to do it, but I don't like to promote it in this context. But I'm just going to reference it, of using the organization project type as non-agentic entities, like ideas or offers and asks, things like that. And that requires a lot of extra steps and work around it. We're probably still the best tool for doing that. So that's great. But the functionality is designed for some group, for it to be a group of agents, active beings that can.
And at two levels, one an aggregated level.
That's what, so when the organization type is an aggregated level of those. Yeah. So that's what I meant. Okay. Does that help?
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. And anyone else, if you have a need to ask a clarifying question before we move forward, feel free, like Jim just said. Okay, so I'm going to sort of quickly show you how it works. Well, actually, let me do another thing. I think she's not. Yeah. Okay, so this is, if you were in a single project, a non-linked project, you would have, this blue bar would be just the title of the group. And then you'd have a thumbnail in sumApp where the person can upload a photo of themselves, put in a little teeny tiny brief bio. Their questions. So these are the questions that went to all human beings in this network. It's fairly long. And then answer the connection questions. So the connection questions, again, are about human beings. And so this panel here is asking Christine Lai how she is related to all of the other people in the network. These questions here are no matter what kind of project you're in, whether it's person or organization, these are all custom. So you can have as many options here as you want. You can have in the higher tiers of sumApp, you can have many questions. So not just options, but questions. And each of these options is editable. So you define the connection questions on the back end. And then every individual gets their own instance of sumApp, and they just walk through, add their thumbnail, go through their connection profile questions, their connection questions, and then they can go to the map. This tab here, the workstream connections, is one of the additional things that happens when you link a person project with an organization project. And what this has here is, again, this is an individual who is not representing an organization. So she has, so now it's asking her, what's your relationship to the work streams that are contained within this network? So there's all these different work streams that Glenn had defined. Each one had a sort of a leader. They all had a focus, and we're asking this person, what is she? Have a strong, medium, or weak connection to this network or work stream. We ended up having internet. I'll show you, but there were different, anyway. There are internal organizations and external or groups that ended up in this project. And so we broke down the question saying, this is about work streams, or this is about external networks that make up this network. And then what other question, what are we missing here in the questions in case people had some other thoughts? So this is what a person who's not representing any kind of group would get. It's not much different from a normal individual project, except that has this extra set of questions. But if someone were either representing a work stream, leading a work stream, or having a representative of an external network, this TSN M&A group was basically made up of 4 separate external networks. And so we mapped them as well. That person, so this is my instance, me personally, of sumApp for this particular project. And so I have up here, I still have the name of the whole group, which is where I answer as an individual. And I have the same kind of interface that Christine Lai had. So I can go in here and I can say, in this one, yep, I have a strong connection to this group and I facilitate or co-facilitate or I convene these. So I could answer my relationship to the work streams. I was aware of all of them. So I said I have a weak connection to all of them. And some of them I was more participated in. So I have a stronger connection, which this little number here shows. But I also represented this particular work stream. That would be seem like, you know, you could have guessed that. And so as the representative of that particular work stream, now I go in here and I can upload a picture that represents the work stream. I can answer questions about the work stream. We didn't have a whole lot of questions because we were still sort of, this was one of the first times we'd been able to do this, use this dual elements feature. And so we just asked a little bit of information, area of focus for the group and the URL. I can easily think of lots more questions we could have been asking. And then I, as representative of the social system mapping sense making sessions work stream, could say what this work stream's relationship is to other work streams. So there's a clear direct relationship between the integration work stream, the transformational fire sessions work stream, and the social system mapping work stream, but it didn't have any direct relationship with any of these other work streams. So that's just kind of how I wanted to sort of share with you that as a wrapping your head around how the data gets gathered and how that dual elements feature kind of looks and interfaces with your members on this end, in the sumApp side. And then I'm going to jump, now I'm going to go start playing with the map, but I want to pause and see if anybody has any questions here about how sumApp gets just that functionality in sumApp. Everyone, hang on, I have to stop sharing to see everybody. Okay, Andrea, I see Hannah's thumb up. Andrea, do you have any questions for, okay, and Anna, are you good at the moment or do you have any clarifying questions or confusions?
No, all good. And great to break the silos and enhance collaboration. Very nice.
Thank you. Great. Okay. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Oh, Jim, do you have?
Seth had a hand up.
Oh, Seth, sorry.
Well, it's not, it was more of a comment or clarification. When you were sharing the view from the organizational perspective or the work stream perspective, and the only connections option was available for other work streams and not to the individuals. So as a contrast to the personal interface. On that particular interface from the workstream perspective, the organizational perspective, you could also have an embedded map, correct? But it would only include the other work streams. It would not include individuals. Is that accurate?
No, you could actually, okay, and thanks for pointing that out, because you could put the same map into the workstream project. It could be the same map, and you could just turn on the map tab. Now you're just making me realize that we haven't turned on the map tab in this project, so that we're sort of saying everybody can go to the map from their individual part of their interface. But you could, depending on what you want to do, you could make separate projects or separate views in, well, it would have to be separate map projects within, or separate maps within the same Kumu project, because each one can have a different embed with a different side panel. So you could do what you just said, but that's not the only option there.
Okay, thanks.
Tom, I see you.
Yes. just an assumption, I just want to double check. So only one person can be the organizational rep. You can't have multiple people representing either organization or workflow or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Work stream.
Yep. Yeah. I'll just add, so the reason, Seth, that I'm backing up and then I'm coming back to you just briefly because Seth, the reason we didn't ask organizations to answer questions about the individuals is because if you think about it, the individual has a better sense of their relationship to the organization. And if it's a big organization, you might have no idea who all these people are or what their role is, and you might not want to feel forced to ask. And so it didn't make a lot of sense to go back to have both kinds of both sides reporting on that relationship, especially if it's like I get services from them. There's how would an organization know all the people who get services or be willing to answer that question, like all of these people get services from our organization? That would be a really onerous ask. So that was our thinking there. Plus it's just very complex in the background. It complexifies the database a lot. So we were motivated not to make it more complex than it is. And then Tom, there was a thing I was going to say, but I just forgot what it was. Response to what did you just? Oh, the one, yeah. And given the way we built it and just the technical constraints that we're working with, only a person can only represent one organization and have the same link. So sometimes you'll have, like Glenn was the head of like 3 or 4 of these working groups. And he had to have enough understanding of what's going on that, his most common one had the individual and the organization, but then he had to have a couple other links where he's responding for another organization, just as the organization. So it's not perfect, but
he could have had somebody from that.
He could have
owned that. That would be another option.
Yeah, he could have. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. We ready to go to the map view? Okay. So I'm going to just show you. So one of the other things I just want to point out is I'm in Kumu now. I have all these tabs open in Kumu. Kumu is, again, the data visualization tool where we design various views. We design, everything from the color and the filters, etc. We do that in Kumu, and then we link that back into sumApp. And so I'm going to just show you how that shows up in sumApp. It's very, very similar. So here's the map that is loading. And again, it's got, lots of different views. And so all the views that we have showing up inside panel here, show up here. But the difference is in this interface where you can see there's this white border around what's called the canvas here. There's some extra kinds of little functionality and lots of editing capacity that you can do. And but you can only change the map and do any kind of damage to the map in Kumu. You can't be doing any kind of editing or changing of the permanent editing or changing of the map in sumApp. And so I want to point out the difference, which is Kumu, you've got this white background. So I can see quickly, oh, I'm in Kumu now. And if I go here, I've got the blue top and it's the name of the group. And then I can see, oh yeah, I can't do anything. I can drive here. I can navigate the map. I can play with the map, but I can't change the map in any way. So I just say this because I've had sometimes people asking me, they're in here and they're saying, why can't I want to make this filter and I can't find how. And I have to say, okay, see, this is how you can tell quickly, because otherwise it can look quite similar. So, and this, again, this tab, little tab, it's not really a tab, but this tab in sumApp can be turned off and on. So until you have enough data and your map is ready, you can leave this off and just gather data. But as soon as possible, it's great to have some kind of prototype map under the map tab so that your people can see what it is that's going on, why you're asking them this information, and how it's going to show up in the map. And if we go back to that little hand-drawn diagram, I had data goes from sumApp into Kumu and then back into, from Kumu back, the map goes back into sumApp. And that can take up to 45 minutes if the internet is really slow, but it's usually a pretty quick update, so that as people are inputting their data into sumApp, the data is showing up on the map. And if they refresh the view, they'll see themselves on the map pretty quickly. And so that is a nice sort of instant payoff for people as well. So thanks, Andrea. Have a good day. Blessings. Okay, so I'll just kind of go through the side. So that for those of you who are new, the side panel is where we introduce the project. We give some hints. We can do anything we want with this. It's editable. See, so I can just change what shows up here. And what we do is in Kumu, we're making the views. The view list is here. We make a bunch of views, and then, but some of them are specific to developing the map, and some of them are made for the end users. And so we like to start with a very simple view, because there's a lot going on here and it can be overwhelming. And then we go, and so a simple view we call is a directory view. There's no lines, it's just the people. We can filter the people by who said they had expertise in cartography, who said they had expertise in evaluation. Whatever the questions are in sumApp, you can create filters for that. So what we're trying to do is think about what are the kinds of things our members would be wanting to search for, and we can filter on that. And then we go, the views get slightly more complex as we go down the side panel until we can have some fairly complex views. I'm going to just show you, I'm going to just go from, this is all the same map. Everything I'm going to show you here is all the same data set in the same Kumu project, but it's different views. So different ways of slicing and dicing and visualizing the data, so that I can just not have to, because sometimes there's a little bit of a lag when I go from view to view. And so I've opened them ahead of time so we don't get stuck with that lag thing. So these are the working groups. So we have we made the working groups have this little orange background, and then we had the blue ones are the ones that were the initial 4. So there's the transition SDG Transformations Forum, the International Geodesign Collaboration, Regenerative Communities Collaboration, and the Blue Marble Evaluation Network. And those 4 came together to create a cross network called Transformation Systems Analysis and Working Group. So these are the internal ones, these are the external ones. And then we had these monthly sessions that weren't really working groups, but they're an invitation to the whole community to show up once a month to do this thing. And so we made those at red. And so here you can see the description of the session and its area of focus. And you can see this shows that I'm clicking on a line, which shows us the relationship from one group to the other group. In this instance, it's we have overlapping work in areas of collaboration. And so those are the working, that's a way of visualizing the relationships amongst the working groups. In this view, we've got, hang on, is it gonna load, finish loading? Yeah. The relationships of individuals, working groups, their relationships to each other, and it looks like we don't have the relationships of the people to people, but we do have the relationships of the people to the group. So Lee, for instance, was the convener to the working group called Mapping the Inner Dimensions. So he said he had a strong connection to it, and he was the working group convener. So this is where we start to see the person to working group relationships. We always have where we have connections on a map, we put, this is a design choice. This is a sort of a norm for Tim and I, is to have the connection questions down here, filters down here in the lower right. So we can see who are the fellows for these working groups, or we can see who are the conveners for the working group. So we can just filter out the kinds of working groups that we're hang on, let's get rid of, yeah, and then we can remove everybody who isn't a convener of a working group, and then we can see all the people who are conveners of working groups. So there's a lot we do with this customizable interactions that you can make in Kumu. And this is the view of the people. Hang on. Yeah, in their personal relationships. So here we have filters on the personal relationship, you know, who's aware of whom, who's collaborating with whom, etc. So if we're working with dual elements, if we're working with dual elements, we can have, there's just a sort of multiplies the complexity of the data and multiplies sort of the kinds of views we want to can make. And there's a lot we can do with that. And there's a lot there. And I'm going to stop for now and see if anybody has questions. And let me stop sharing. Did we lose Hannah also? Oh, you're right there. Never mind. I see you. So questions, like concerns about how overwhelming it is?
I have something, Christine. So did I miss, or maybe it can't be done? So you had the workflow with the organization thing with the people connected, but then that person's personal network would be a different view, or you can be on the same view.
Either one.
Okay.
However, it just depends. The thing is, even, let me see if we made one with everything. People, interpersonal, crossworks, people, and we didn't, hang on. Yeah, I think we didn't make one that had all the person and all the possible connections. Like if you want to put all 3 connection types, it just is a huge visual mess. And until someone says, I would filter in this way and that way, and I need to have all 3 of those connection types on there because I need to see X and Y, it's less overwhelming for everybody to just put the different ways you might look at it into different views and not try to do that whole huge mashup. But also, like, our design sort of a principle for us is we kind of try to do, you know, a few basic things, and then we wait and see what people ask for, because if they don't need it and it doesn't help them, there's no reason for us to put time into building it and then forcing them to understand it and overwhelming them and having a lot of challenge. If there isn't like, oh, we need to see X, how can we see X? Then Tim and I go, yay, fun, we'll figure this out.
Right.
But,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so might happen tomorrow, probably, just because you brought it up. Especially those of you who are newer, we just very much welcome if there's thoughts or what's coming up for you, or questions, as well as questions. And like I said, they can't be too dumb. So, and no, but also no pressure. Denise, can I ask you a question? I know there was potential thinking about mapping organizations in your project. Did any of this, I'm not going to ask you right here now. You don't have to say if it's going to go forward or not.
It was scary. It was scary. I was like, oh boy, do you really want to do it?
Yeah, maybe we don't want this.
Yeah, that's why I had no kind of response. It was a lot. I was just wondering, is the it's a sustainability question, whether it's the personal relationships or organizations, the same thing, like the same issue. I'm just thinking, like, if we map these organizations, it's still a person who has to filter in for the organizations, the information, whatever, periodically. Yeah. So I was just thinking about the sustainability issue. No, I think it'll be worth trying. I really have to speak to Lee Ben again, because he was the one who really wants the organizations. For me, instinctively, it was really about the people more than the organizations. I'm still, to be honest, wrapping my head around the benefit of it, given how people pop in and out of jobs and move from places. So I'm like, if the person who's the representative of an organization. Let's say I'm Denise for NAPSI, but then I move and start to work at another organization or leave the industry altogether. I have to make sure in my move that I actually tell someone to fill in the information that I've put in on the map as part of, I guess, the transfer of positions and stuff. So I'm still thinking that second part over, to be honest. But like I said, Ben was deeply interested and he wanted an organizational to organizational. I just don't know how accurate or up to date that is and what happens when people leave their jobs.
Yeah. I had just a couple thoughts that are coming up. One is, if you would like, you could share this map with them, which might overwhelm them enough to say
No.
no. The other, which is not what I want you to do, of course, but
Yes.
but no, I want you to get what you need. The other one is to really probe about what is, which it sounds like you're already doing in your head, but really, what is the value? What is it we really want to understand about the relationships between the organizations? Because often people just want organizations to feel acknowledged or primary. And if that's all you really need, depending on how long the organization list is, you could just list the organizations and then people could say, I have some, just align to the organizations. It's not going to have the various qualities of relationship, and we're not going to be able to have information in the node. But that's another way of approaching the acknowledged organizations piece. And also, however, sometimes when a field is defined enough, it can be really valuable to know, like, okay, Denise right now works for NAPSI, but if you were to move to another organization in the same network, to know that for people to know you did used to work for NAPSI, because that gives, like, if you could see in your network how people are moving from organization to organization, because there's more, like there's a larger repository of knowledge about the whole network in someone who's been in various places in the network. So that is one value of that. Last thought was simply, depending on how big the network is, of how long the organization list is, you could have someone from your organization, if you have the capacity, just call them up once a year and interview them and say, has anything changed? And then, oh, the person who was the org rep is gone. Who do you want to assign that new thing to? And, oh, have you changed any partnerships from these organizations? Is anything in the profile changed? Because organizations don't change as much as individuals and relationships. Right. So,
okay.
There.
Thank you.
No, thanks for letting me pick on you.
No
and
problem.
Jim, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering if this way of looking at things makes sense as well. So if you have more organizations than people can keep track of, so your network horizon as a participant in there is that I sort of know what's going on with 10 organizations, but there's 40 organizations in the network. Then one thing I would like as a participant is to be able to have a visual directory of those 40 organizations and have people, those organizational reps say what their organization's about, what's important, how to get, all the information that we have, like we do with people when the network horizon is bigger than we can hold. So that's one value on the network. The other is, if we thought at some level that our theory of change, of systems change within this, was that we would have certain kinds of relationships between the organization, then we'd want to have questions about that organizational relationship. And that would be important to make that visible. Or if it was important that we understood, because of what we thought, the system of what we thought our theory of change involved was our relationship of individuals to the organizations, then we'd want to have a place to ask, what is our relational quality between the individual and the organization? And so now a dual entity map makes sense, because you can make that visible. So, but if you don't have that going on, or any of those going on, then Christine said, you can just have membership listed as an attribute in each person, you know, on the list, and you can cluster around it and see that. But if you thought those other things were important, then this is a way to do it.
Yeah, I'll just add that even if the relationships between the people in the organizations isn't key, it might be just having a picture of, like, the way we can do sort of a systemic, you know, review of individuals. We could also be doing that of just the organ, you know, just put the organizations on and say who's working on this kind of issue, who's working on that kind of issue. And, you know, our theory of change is that we need more people working on, you know, equitable transit. And we see, okay, we've got, you know, no one working on equitable transit, no organization working on equitable, whatever it is. So you can start to see gaps as well in the structure of the organizations present. So you can make anything we gather, we can make it simpler to digest and simpler to work with. But there's the capacity to have it be very complex and see super complex stuff, but we can also make views, et cetera, and use it in much more broken down, simpler ways as our insight and understanding of what we want to look at grows. There was one little quick thought that was, but still, there has to be some value like that, like, and there probably is, because he's saying he wants it, but really interrogating him about, like, why, you know, using 9 whys of why is that important, will help clarify what kinds of, by Hannah, what kinds of questions, etc. So it's time to close, and we lost Hannah before we did our, and Jim, can you hold until we do the goodbye ritual? Thank you. So we'll do our goodbye ritual now, Anna. That means we all unmute. I count down 3, 2, 1, and as soon as I get to 1, we all give each other our blessings and well wishes for the day. And Anna just disappeared anyway. So okay. Who else is leaving? Should we do? We'll still do it and let people jump off and then see who remains. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
Have a
great day.
Bye.
Great day.
Wonderful week.
Love to everyone.
Good to see you all.
Take care.
And now, so Jim, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. It seems to me that maybe in Denise's situation, it's so much easier to build single layer map. So you could build 2 maps, one for organization and one for people. And if there wasn't an important reason to think about the connection between the people in the organization, you can simplify your life, I guess, and just have 2 maps, an organizational map and a people map. And then at some point where you say, gosh, it's the relationship between the people and the organizations that's so key, then you might want to make that visible and create a dual system map. And I hadn't been thinking about that before, because I always think about, oh yeah, we're all connected in the organization, and gosh, what's my question going to be between the people and the organization? And it's sort of an afterthought, perhaps, in the networks that I've been looking at. So it just makes me think about it differently.
Yeah.
No, thanks. Those are all really great points and very helpful. And just so, Jim, just to give you the background, initially when I signed up, when I approached Christine, we were going to do the 2 maps just because it sounded great. And then it was financial constraints. We're like, okay, let's just choose 1 map. And then I had just recently, within the last week, met someone who I was asking to be one of the initial mapping stakeholders, who's part of another organization. And he just said quickly he'd really like to know the organizational relationships, but asking these deep questions we haven't done together. So it might turn out that what all of the things that you all have proposed, like thinking about what is our main goal and do we really need to have these relationships revealed or not, might shift his thinking and of this idea of us needing to see an organization. So I think once we show him what we're planning to build, and then we can come on board. But the most important thing is he said he would be able to finance the other part. So either way, we'll figure it out. But if he's really insistent on it, it's cool. But we're like, we have this cap and that's all we can work with. So it was more like from a conference I was at a couple weeks ago that the conversation started, because I kind of put it to like the back burner, the whole organizational part, but asking about like the theory of change or knowing there's different possible ways of showing, maybe when he's saying organization, he might just want a list might just suffice, right? Or I'm not sure if he was really thinking more deeply about the relationships between the people to the organizations. So I think through conversations and actually probing with him in our group setting, we'll be able to figure it out. But these were really helpful.
Yeah, this was good timing for that. I was thinking that I was, like when I was thinking about what to do with this map, because we've all looked at it several times, and I was like, well, we haven't really focused on dual. And Denise is right in the middle of this.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And I was just in, and Jim was in it too. We were just in another call that goes until 12 o'clock, the opening of like a network weaving ceremonies. So that's why I was a little bit late. I was like, oh, should I stay or should I go to the community of practice? And then I went to you. So I'm glad I came. So it all worked out.
It's great.
It all worked out. No, it was very helpful. Yeah, everything always looks intimidating at first until you understand it. But it did make me think, why do we really think about why do we need the organizations, if at all? And if we do, then that's great. Yeah, so it's perfect.
How many?
It makes me,
go ahead.
I'm just going to say this one sentence. It makes me think, the directory view where there's no connections, there's just the dots. If that is useful to your partner, but those dots are organizations, because the network horizon is just bigger than you can hold, and you just want that information. That's a reason to map. Maybe but you could do it with a spreadsheet, but it's not as easy visually to do that. And then you can decide, is there a reason to know the relationships between these organizations?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. How many organizations are we talking about? Roughly?
I don't think it would be more than 30.
That's what I thought. I had 40 for some reason.
I was gonna say 30 to 40, but I think that would just be about it. That would be it.
So that's not too big a population to try and if it's useful, it's not too big a population to try and sort of to nag and hound, and if you have to do some holding, to do some hand holding.
Okay.
Depends on your capacity, of course. So, but it's not like if there's 200. If it's 200,
no.
I would be like, no, I'm not even going to propose that that's an option, because that's just way too many. Nobody wants to deal with that. But
no, and not at this stage. That would be a dream. But no, it's not that many.
Yeah.
Not at all. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Denise, are you jumping off? Or are you sticking around?
I'll stick on for 2 more minutes. I'm just really hungry as I'm like eating these tangerines, so I'll leave soon. But I'll wait for Tom's question.
This is hypothetical. It may never happen, but I can envision somebody asking. So in these city transformation networks, I envision the network is of nonprofits and churches, whatever, that are participating. And though this idea to have organization and people connections makes sense, but I could also suspect that some of those organizations may want its own network map for its own work it does.
Yeah.
So to somehow, did all these get connected somehow, that maybe if someone isn't part of the main network, they're one of the sub networks, they can see they're part of a bigger thing than they think they are? Does that make sense? I'm not even sure I'm asking this right.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. This comes up. This is not a.
Okay, good.
It's still mostly in hypothetical land,
right?
In terms of actual practice, but so for instance, on the TSMNA map, how we have those 4 outer networks, the redder dots. Okay. It gets really messy really fast. It sounds like a really good idea, and people always say they want to see the network of networks, but if you actually think about it, it gets really messy really fast. But if these different organizations were willing and able to use the exact same survey, So you could, so they don't have different questions for the individuals. Then you could just make a larger map. You could use have the organizations be these other networks. For instance, in our community practice map, we say who's involved with the Blue Marble Network and the HSD practice, or, we ask that, we have a list and we ask who's involved in these different networks. And there's a way you can grow that list over time with just use an other field and then add to it. So that's one not super great answer, but that's one answer. And again, it gets messy really fast. So I can only answer it when these very, if this, then that sort of, but and I don't know if this is even a thing anymore, but I'll just say it. There's another tool called Graph Commons, which is open source, which Drew Mackey, who's a member of our community, uses a lot because he likes the way it does its statistics better, its metrics better, and it does some certain layout things that Drew uses more. He uses both. He uses Kumu and Graph Commons. And so we adjusted, he hired us to adjust sumApp output to work with Graph Commons. It's not live linkable, but it's uploadable manually. The thing now, Graph Commons recently changed everything, and Drew is very mad at them, and he says he hates it. So now, I mean, he used to love it, but now he's very mad. I mean, he's not emotional about it, but he's just like, yeah, they messed up, and I hate that now. But the thing that was really interesting about Graph Commons, and the reason I'm saying this is because you could have a network, and each node would have a side panel, and at the bottom of that node's side panel or profile, it was actually a page, there would be a link that would show every other map that name is on. So Christine Capra is on a whole bunch of draft maps. So if you could find me in any map in Graph Commons, find any map that I'm on, you can't search by people, but you can search by maps. If you found one that I was on and you went down to the bottom, you could click on that, and then it would show a list of all the other maps in Graph Commons that are publicly visible. So not the private ones, but the publicly visible ones that I'm on. That's the closest to a real functionality that does what we're talking about that I'm aware of, that's not totally a total custom solution from beginning to end with coding and, using some special graph like Neo4j or something.
Yeah, that's what I thought we'd be getting into graph databases and other stuff. And this is far from what anybody, I mean, that would blow their minds, but I was just curious as I think about when setting up to begin with, if that's one day a possibility, how might think about the initial setup to not have it be unavailable. Yeah.
Well, it might still be that piece of Graph Commons works, and that, I mean, it does take more, it takes somebody downloading the data and uploading the data repeatedly, and then hoping that nothing changed and broke the ways you had it set up. But that could still be using that particular piece. It's not everything you would want though. So it is very much in my mind because it comes up a lot. I see you, Jim, in a second. And so it is something that I'm always, as we're doing changes to sumApp, or as we're thinking about our future, that's something that's always in the back of my mind, is how can we be moving in that direction? But for the moment, there's not much difference that you're going to make.
And if I understand correctly, not a huge demand at this point.
Oh no, the people would like that. There's just
okay. I'm trying to.
Yeah, Jim.
Tom, why would that be important to the various roles within your network? So why would that be important to individuals? Why would that be important to network weavers? Why would that be important to network individual holders? And I'm just broadcasting the question. Like who would it be important to and why?
And again, this is hypothetical, but it's very much this network of networks where a lot of the people I'm working with are promoting that that's what they do. They're a convener of networks, and they want to be able to show their network, to show their value, to show because they're sort of new nonprofits, they don't have a standing, I'm talking about, this is like across like churches, for example. So they don't have a standing funding source. So they're looking for a new way to show their value versus every other nonprofit, which I think is a word I've heard here, or network, not a nonprofit, or that's actually one of the phrases one of these guys uses. How we're different than a nonprofit is the power of network. But there's also a movement at the churches, so it might be a very large church who wants to re-envision themselves as a network, not as a hierarchy. So they could be a node on the city map as an organization. Then they'd want to create their own map, maybe with different questions, right? Because they have a different culture, potentially than the city culture. They'd want to create their own. But part of what they're trying to help people see is if you can do your part where you are, you're actually participating in this bigger movement. You know, you don't have to save the world, you just need to kind of do your thing. So that's the way they talk in meetings.
Yep.
Whether or not they actually want that, I don't know, but those are the kind of things they say.
Yeah. Can I opine for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I love opining.
I hear this request frequently. I get talked to by people for like as a person who does this work, people reach out to me who are, you know, doing something related to this work and want some kind of software solution to some challenge that they think they have. And they reach out and they propose, they'll say things like, oh, I've got access to $1 billion. And what would you, you know, and I have gotten tired of that conversation. And, and I say, no, you get very clear, very specific about what it is you want. Come back to me and I will say, I can do that or I can't, but I'm not going to ideate with you, design with you. No, I'm not going there because, but anyway, so I hear that desire, and I've also, you know, as a person in my role now in the world, I get also talked to by other people who are doing similar things. So developers who are trying to like, and the network of networks is a big buzzword. People will say, we're going to map that. We want to map the network of networks. And I used to think really hard about how inadequate we were and how important, you know, how could we get there? But it's, you know, as soon as I start to think about it, I'm like, oh my God, it's really messy. It's overwhelming. And, but in watching a number of other groups start to try and develop the software, what I see is, you know, it's like 15 years ago when everybody was wanting to make, what are those tools like forums, you know, online forums where people can ask and answer questions. And the truth is, I don't think the people on the ground want that and have a great deal of interest in that. I think it's a curiosity that is more up for the people who are trying to market themselves in this space, or people who are, I've watched it long enough to feel like this is maybe eventually, if we could get really super sophisticated, there could be value here. I see the potential for value here. And I don't think either technically, but also socially. I don't feel like, I mean, people have a hard time understanding a social system map. If we make multiple layers of it, it doesn't serve the people on the ground. And my whole value set for this work is to serve the people on the ground as opposed to the social engineers at the top of, or at the center. Like, so.
I think that's wonderful. That's the kind of reality I'm trying to bring. I want to bring reality, not more pie in the sky.
Yeah.
And thinking about, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Let's see if we can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we can, but those get people excited. So I'm trying to jump on the excitement, but also make it realistic. So I don't want to be part of the That's why I like these conversations, because it's real.
Tom, why wouldn't it be enough to provide a survey that's fairly generic, oriented towards each of these networks or organizations, and say, if you want to show yourself on this coalition, answer these 10 questions, and they will then see themselves and be able to show that to funders and whatever, and call it done, as opposed to having all the people filling out surveys at both the network level and what. Yeah.
I think it probably just a couple different audiences, and because part of what Christine said, if it's just the organizations, that eliminates the everyday man who's also being invited into this. So it's not just at the organizational level this change happens. And that's so I want and expect, and people want to be able to say, hey, I'm part of this. Even if I'm not part of these organizations, I'm still part of this change movement.
Yeah.
So I don't want to, I think the dual thing could work very well without expanding into the network of networks. So I think it could hit both of those audiences. The other challenges that, how do you make sure the network isn't, well, that's a whole nother thing, right? People are in the network for the purpose of the network, not for their purpose. Yeah. And that's a whole nother thing. But
one of the things that strikes me with this is the distinction that I started making in the last year between an audience and a network. And often people will want to call their audience a network. They'll want to say, yeah, we have a network, but it actually doesn't function like a network.
Right.
It's more, we make presentations and 80 people show up, but they don't actually know each other. We don't provide them any opportunity to interact or support for micro collaborations or anything like that. And that there's a number, we have clients who are trying to make that shift from an audience to a network, and they're mapping for that. But I think a lot of the jumping on the bandwagon of the network thing is people saying, oh, we have a huge audience. And that's what they want to show in their map, is when they're fundraising, they're trying to say we're relevant because we've got 5,000 people on our map.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily work, because there's no value for the people in it. It's not.
Yeah, I'm not a happy camper in those meetings. I'm the one that says that ain't really anything. Just put down, you have 5,000 people, put a number.
Yeah.
We have 1,000, that's all you've really done. So don't say it's any more than that. So I assume there's enough people that actually want to do the work. Yeah. That'll see the value in this.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, the idea of ownership, and a lot of times funders or evaluation types of things are around, what are the 5 things you did this year, your accomplishments. And it's interesting that you can contribute towards the success of another entity or network or whatever, but it doesn't, you're not claiming any ownership, but you're unable to visualize that picture of a web of relationships. So in my case, a leadership group around a collaborative, I would say a half or more of the people in this leadership circle created their own networks, and that went on with their own evolution and so on. So it's challenging to represent the value of it's sort of what contributed to what in terms of success. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible to claim that you were the linchpin to anything.
Which is the great part of this. I mean, I think that's a big question. We don't have ownership over each other, our relationships or each other, and changing that dynamic of the leader as the one who made something happen.
Yeah, well, this tool is really, I'm viewing it as a way to help people who want to do that, not the other way around. I don't think the tool can force anybody to change how they want to lead.
Yeah.
So it can't, I just don't want to hijack it.
Right.
I just want the tool to be for those that are trying to make that change and they have something to help them.
Yeah.
That's why I like the visualizer so much, because people can see themselves on that visualizer and say, okay, that's me, that's my problem.
Yeah.
Here's how this might be helpful.
Yeah.
But if they don't have those problems, then they don't need this.
Yep.
It's very helpful. I appreciate your guys' years of wrestling with it. It's very wise and helpful. So,
Christine, I have a question. Was the dual element, was this map the first instance of using that? My question for you is, what was innovative for you in terms of this project and the map?
Well, it was a while ago, so it's not fresh in my memory, but yeah, I think this was the very first dual element project that was made.
Okay. Okay.
And I remember I don't know if this was the innovation, but it was like, as we started playing with the data, we were like, oh my God, so many views. It's like, oh, so many views. Like, how have we, I mean, they're fairly simple, but on the other hand, there was a lot of thinking that went into how to develop those views. And I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you put the link to the map again in the chat? I think you gave it to me, but I want to double check that it's in my records.
Yeah, hang on. This is the embed of the map. And Denise, if you want to grab it for your conversation or just for you to ponder some more and be overwhelmed by some more. Think about it. Yeah. There's a lot of the filters not many people will show up, because in this one we loaded, Glenn started with a survey, a survey monkey survey, and we transformed all the data and loaded it into sumApp. And so there are the questions that pretty much everyone answered, but then the new questions and the connection questions, I mean, there were new questions that we added to sumApp after loading Glenn's survey, and then the connection questions that not a lot of people did. So there's a lot of unansweredness given the brevity of the whole overall project. But that's why if you come across places where you think there should be something more, it probably isn't. But anyway, yeah. Anything else? Are we ready to wrap? Call it a wrap? Denise is hungry, I know.
The water is filling my belly, so it's okay. I was drinking less, but yeah.
Well, you can always eat with us, we don't have, it's not that formal. It's fine.
I feel bad. I was like, I had to come off camera because I was really stuffing my face. It's like, okay, a tangerine I can deal with, but I was really hungry. But no, thank you. Well, so
it never stops me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for this conversation and the dual elements.
Yeah.
I learned something every time.
And thanks, Denise, for being a guinea pig of the conversation.
No problem. It's a good conversation. I'll see everyone on Monday.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.